Welcome to the Dive Podcast. My name is Pastor Joe. I am the lead pastor at Grace Point Community Church of the Nazarene. Next to me, on my left and right, are some other pastors from the church here. We have to my left.
Brad Salyers.
And to my right.
Dustin Clark.
Boom. There we go. We're here with you every week on Wednesdays, right? We drop this on Wednesdays. We talk about the message from the Sunday before, break it down a little bit more, talk some extra about it. If there's things that maybe couldn't fit into the structure of Sunday morning, we dig into those things. Today, we've even been talking before the recording of a bunch of different stuff. So I'm excited to get into it this morning. I guess, yeah, I can say morning, right? That's fine. Excuse me. Sorry. Still don't have a Red Bull sponsorship, but are we allowed to accept sponsorship?
Okay.
Is that,
yeah, I don't
turn the can to the.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need money. I just want free.
Free Red Bull.
Yeah, they don't. They could buy me very cheap.
Yeah.
But this week we talked about Abraham. If you don't know Abraham, he's way back in the beginning in Genesis. He's the father of Israel. Basically, if you're an Israelite, you source yourself back to Abraham. God used him to, I think it's phrased, descendants that outnumber the stars, right? Look up, and if you can count the stars, then that's how many descendants you're going to have.
Some would say he even had many sons.
Yes. That's
Little inside church joke. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Father. Anyway,
we talked about faithfulness, about how Abraham is an amazing example of what faithfulness looks like, that we can look back on and even institute in our lives today. It's really odd to me to think of, like, we're talking about and teaching about someone that lived 4,000 years ago. That just seems like a lot of time that's passed. 4,000 years from now, if the world's still here, I would imagine they're still going to be telling people about Abraham and how God worked through him. So it's amazing to me how scriptures have been passed down to us and remained through trials and all kinds of. There's been governments and peoples that tried to exterminate them completely, but they still persist and end up even in today's world in our hands. So side encouragement here: read your Bible. Not just because we're pastors and we're supposed to tell you that, but it's good for you. Start your morning with a little bit of scripture. It'll change your day. It'll change how you look at different things in your life. It won't solve all your problems for you in an instant, but I think on Sunday I compared it to, like, if you're frustrated with life and you don't understand why things just aren't working together, you wouldn't get a piece of furniture from IKEA and not look at the instructions. You would you would read them and try to use the instructions to help you put the piece together. If you didn't and you complained about it, it would not be a valid complaint, because you'd be like, well, why didn't you look at the instructions? And it's right there in the scriptures. Like, everything that we need is there. So open them up, read them. But we got into faithfulness, and I always love preaching about obedience and sacrifice, because they're just they're difficult.
Yeah.
And they're not as flashy as healing and love and grace and kindness and all those things, which are, there's nothing wrong with love and grace and kindness and healing. But those are kind of, a lot of times you feel a lot of those feelings on the mountaintop, and it's the obedience and the sacrifice that gets you through even in the valley. And it's so much harder to exist in that mindset for long periods of time. I don't know. Do you guys agree or disagree with that assessment?
Sure. Obedience is, I think it's God's love language. We talk about the 5 love languages that we have here on earth, but I actually think obedience is the 6th one. I think it's God's love language. When we obey God, it shows our true love, I would say.
Yeah, my dad would always say, you'd say, I love you, say, well, show me, right? Don't just say it.
Yeah.
Like, show me through your action, like through, and it's why do people struggle with obedience so much?
It's control, right?
Yeah.
If we're obeying somebody else, we're not in control of that 90% of the time, for the most part.
Oh yeah, I don't know. The heart wants what the heart wants sometimes, and you know what I mean. You have to
Yeah. Do you think it could boil down to like a trust thing? So
No, sure. If you don't,
No,
if
yeah.
you don't obey, I mean, if you're not obeying, that means you don't trust.
or I was thinking
100% what that
I was
means,
thinking
right?
at the flip side of like maybe it's hard. You're right, by the way, but maybe it's difficult for us to have obedience because we don't trust the person or corporation or thing that's asking for our obedience.
Sure.
Sure.
Where when it's human to human or any type of
Yeah.
interaction that way, there's always this question mark behind your actions of, does this person really have the best for me and my best interest in mind? Like, I know I've worked for this company for 20 years, but do they really care about me? I've been in this relationship for 10 years, but do they really understand who I am? And there's a comfort that comes with being obedient to God because you can trust Him completely, and you can know that He is good and He is capable and all those things. And so there is a difference between even obedience between like people versus obedience between you and God.
Yeah.
I might sneeze.
Yeah, I think with that too, though, trust and obedience, both of those come with time. At least in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't just right out the gate just trust somebody fully most of the time. If you do, more than likely you get hurt quite a bit,
That's
right?
yeah.
But so I guess you could correlate that. A lot of young believers would want to, how do I obey God more? How do I lose like some sin in my life? And some of that unfortunately just comes with time, learning to trust God because He's been faithful to you. And then it becomes easier to obey once you trust, right? Like you just said it. So
I mean, I even think that's even the case with God. I mean, when you
Yeah.
first become a Christian, for sure. Like, but it's like God. That's why God doesn't give you like the big things right out the gate. You know what I mean? Like, you become a Christian, He doesn't give you like, hey, you're going to a mission field tomorrow. You know what I mean, I'm not saying that He can't, but I'm saying most of the time it's all right. Something small comes into your life. God starts to build that trust as you see God answer little prayers in your life. He starts, and that's why when God says you don't have to worry, but trust me, that doesn't start.
Yeah.
I mean, that your worry, little more worry, a little less worry, then a little less worry, then you get. Hopefully, you finally get to a point in your Christian life, like when worry sets in. God, the thought of, oh, I know God's going to take care of me.
Yeah.
He's taking care of me through so much other stuff. I
Yeah.
know He's going to take care of me now. But when you first become a Christian and you're going through something like, okay, I'm not really sure if,
Yeah.
God, did I even, like, I mean, for me, it was like, God, did I even make the right choice?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, when I come from a Jewish family, so it's like, well, take that with a grain of salt. But I come from, like, we're taught that Jesus isn't the Son of God. And so, like, when I accepted Jesus and I had problems in my life, my very first thing, I remember sitting at the, I mean, I guess I'll tell this story. So, like, I might as well at this point. I'm already
Yeah, you're in it.
We're here now.
already
Just
there.
throw both feet in and go.
No, so long story short, I became a Christian. And then I only really had one person in my life that I knew who was a Christian. And then she ends up telling me we can't be friends anymore. And so now I am the only person in my life at this moment in my life. No church, no friends, no family, nothing.
Yeah.
And my first thought, and at the time I had so I'll tell you that, let me back up a little bit, but I went to this girl's house. Her mom had a stack of Bibles on the table. She randomly hands me a Bible so I can start reading it. And now fast forward to this part where I'm trying to like start in Matthew, reach at Matthew 1, Matthew 2, Matthew 3. And she tells me, this girl's like, we can't be friends anymore. So now I'm the only person. I'm trying to do what's right. If you know any of my background, that's like super hard. And so I remember making a prayer, and like I remember praying like, God, did I make the right decision? Like, you know what I mean? Like in my mind, I thought, okay, I accept Jesus Christ. My life's supposed to just start getting better. You're right. And like my life got completely like worse from an emotional standpoint. And now I have no friends. And I'm like, wait a second. I was like, did I accepting Jesus was the wrong thing?
Yeah.
Because I'm Jewish and now I'm being punished?
Being punished.
Yeah. So like I remember sitting in front of this table with this Bible closed. It was closed. I'm sitting at the kitchen table and I remember praying this prayer. God, did I mess up? Did I make a mistake? Basically make yourself real to me. I remember making that prayer. And I opened up this Bible randomly. to a page,
Dangerous game.
Yeah.
randomly open the Bible up.
Scripture
I was just-
roulette.
I don't know where. I like, where's Matthew? Where's this? Right? Like, I don't know. So I kind of just open up the Bible. I'm trying to I might get this wrong a little bit, but I remember I have the Bible still. But I think it was when to read what chapter calendar kind of deal. I think that's the kind of Bible it was. But it had pen mark in it, and then the pen mark it had 2 dates. One of the dates had a line through it, but there were handwritten dates, and one of the dates was August 13th, 1983. And I was born August 13th, 1983. You know what I mean?
Whoa.
And God was like, you're exactly where I want you to be in this very moment in time.
Yeah.
And so, like, this has happened to me with a book and something like that before, later on when I went to college, because I prayed that prayer again. I was like, God, am I supposed to be where I'm at? And I opened up another book, and it had basically my address in it. And it was like, oh, you're exactly where I want you to be. And so, like, but we're talking about trust. And if you're following God and you've accepted Jesus and you're following God, you can trust God that He's. I hate the song. Like, I don't hate the song, but the song that God hasn't failed me yet.
Oh yeah, I just wish they would change the word there.
Just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Just get rid of the word
I have
yet.
the same feeling of that.
Yeah, every
song.
time you
I'm
read
like,
it,
why is
like-
yet here?
Yeah,
Because
like-
it implies that he's
that
going
he-
to at
that
one
he
point.
can.
Yes, like that.
That implies that He can, not
Yeah.
necessarily that He will,
Right.
but that
Just-
He can.
Just change the T to a AH, and you can just say yeah.
Because yeah.
I don't know about all that.
And Lil Jon will be your.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't hear that.
That's
no, no. Yeah.
That song is.
All right, we're just having fun. on the
Lord
podcast.
help us
Don't
all.
listen to it.
No, that's
From
funny.
back in the
That's
day.
funny. That's
So. No, so yeah, but
the first time I heard that song, I had the same feeling. I was like, "This is a great song," but I wish they'd change that one word.
Right.
yeah, and I think, but you can trust. You can definitely trust God, and it gets it. I want to say it does get easier.
Yeah.
I think the things get bigger, but I do think it gets easier as you walk with God and He answers prayers. I think it gets easier.
And that's why it's so important for us as older Christians to share testimonies of what God's done for the younger Christian.
Yes.
Yeah, because like you said, for the most part, you're not going to get given big things like missionary assignments and that kind of stuff as a new Christian, but emotion tells you that you will. I mean, how many times I know? I think you guys we've all done youth ministry, whatever. You've gone to an altar to pray with a kid or whatever, and all of a sudden he's called to Africa to be a missionary, or I'm called into youth ministry all of a sudden. And I don't want to discount those things, but man, I heard a guy this week that said about ministry. He said, you know, he has people come to him all the time that are called to ministry, and the first question he asks them is, well, who are you mentoring or discipling right now? Like, are you in that right now? Because otherwise, like, maybe you need to slow your roll a little bit, I guess is what he's saying.
And that might be
you
the
know.
long-term call.
Yeah, but like
you have to do the next step.
there's
now
steps
to get
coming
that.
to it. It's the long game,
Yes.
like Dustin just
You're
said.
not jumping from
Yeah,
here
yeah.
to there.
Yeah.
It's okay. This is where God's calling you to. Now, what do you need to do to make your life look like what that
Right.
would look like?
Right.
And that's where I think people struggle and burn out. Is they see that call and they're like, "Ooh, I want that."
Yeah.
And they see other people in their life that are already there on that spiritual journey, and they're thinking, "Oh, I could be there immediately." Like,
Yeah.
But I'm not saying God can't do that, by the way. But I'm saying a lot of the time, what
Very
he'll do-
rarely does he
yes,
do it that
is
way.
He'll say,
Yeah.
"Hey, you're here. Lose this habit.
Yeah.
You need to, maybe that friend is someone that you shouldn't be around, or you need to change how you treat this
Yeah.
person in your life." And like he starts to mold you into what that person needs to be, right? To be in that ministry
Yeah.
position.
You said it yesterday, and it's so true that like we come in a microwave society right now, right? We want everything right now. It's got to like we've got to get our ducks in a row, and like it's got to be sorted out immediately. And unfortunately, there's a waiting process for most things.
And a molding process.
Yeah, I'm waiting, molding,
'Cause
getting
that's
ready.
What's happening in the waiting.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
making
He's
you
doing
into-
something.
Yes,
Yeah, he's
and
doing a work.
It's how does this relate to Abraham, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Abraham is promised that he'll have an heir, which means a
Yep.
son, basically. He's worried that some other person around him, I can't remember the guy's name, is going to inherit all his stuff, and like God kind of interrupts him a little bit, and he says, "Oh, this guy's not going to get all your stuff." Like he says, it's in Genesis 15. Says, "This man will not be your heir." And he took him, being Abraham, outside, and he says, now look toward the heavens and count the stars, if you're able to count them. And he said, so too shall your descendants be, which implies that he's going to have a son, which is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But from the promised time to when Isaac is actually born is 25 years.
Yeah.
And I would struggle to wait that long for something.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to say something. Cause,
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good, because it goes into over the weekend when we were at this conference. I think it was Kathy who said, or I forget. And it goes with Abraham and it goes with us, because we say, "Oh, God called us to this," but we're like, there's a process. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that really stuck out to me with quote was, "He is as interested in the product that he is in the process."
Yeah.
The process, we want to jump ahead so fast, but it's the process that
that makes it. Yeah.
He's interested in the process.
Yep.
Almost sometimes more than the product.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the process is what makes the
product.
Right.
Yeah, you don't get the cake without the proper process before.
Yeah.
Right. And that's maybe to your point, Brad, how you're saying we should be telling our testimonies how God moved in big ways in our lives, because once you get to a point where people, and unfortunately this happens if you're in ministry, people that didn't know you before just assume you've always been, first off, they assume you're better than you are for some reason, and they assume that you're more capable than you actually are.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that person does that must mean they're all these things. And you're like, I'm just a...
Because people only see the product
Yes.
sometimes.
And
They
Yeah.
don't understand
Right.
what the process actually
Yes.
took for me to get here.
And
Yeah.
they didn't
there's
see
this
some of the
false-
hard times, right? And the doubt and the struggle, or even the failure that
the
may
more
have happened.
hard times than there's
Yes.
not.
You
Yeah.
look at, I remember there was a couple that lived next door to us when I was growing up, and they were married for, their whole lives, right? And you look at them and you're like, oh, they probably never fought or never struggled. And then I get older and find out that they were separated for a year and a half and didn't know it was going to, and then eventually came back to each other and they made it work. They had a real life relationship that had problems and struggle. And when you're seeing them at the end product of what their relationship was, you'd have never guessed that.
Right.
You'd have never guessed it in a million years. But then you look at it and you go, oh, that, and that's encouraging to someone who's on the other end of it, who might be going through a struggle, going through a hard time, and they look at it and they say, oh, this is something that God can bring me through.
Yeah.
Because he did that for them. They weren't just born, married and perfect.
Yeah. I make the joke all the time. People will come up to Missy and I, and they'll say, "Oh, you have such well-rounded boys. Oh, they're great kids. What did you do?" And it's I don't necessarily know, but I can tell you a lot of things that we did wrong, right? How we messed up and stuff, and they by the grace of God, they got to be where they are, and that kind of stuff.
When Brad and Missy shared their struggles of marriage and everything, I'm like, no, I was like, that's not Brad.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't believe that.
No,
Yeah.
I tell Laura, I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah.
and then they go through all their stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
like, no,
Brad really is a jerk. What are you talking about? Yeah, no, it's
you talk about Brad. I'm like, no, not the Brad I know.
yeah.
That's not my brand.
No, it's true.
But,
Yeah.
There's a reality to and the enemy uses that false misconception, I guess I can say, that people have. Someone's just into the faith and they look at people who have been in it for a while, and there's this,
get discouraged.
and they
Yeah.
feel separated.
Sure.
And so that's why I like
I
to be.
could never be like.
Yes, and that's why I like to be really transparent about my struggles, and letting people know, hey, all of us are going. That's why I think you asked about doubt. I don't know if we were being recorded or not when you said that, but I don't think the doubt is the problem. I think it becomes the problem when it prevents us from doing what God's calling us to do.
100%.
Yeah.
Later we'll talk about Abraham and the sacrifice and Isaac and all that, and did he doubt as he's going up the mountain? It's well, maybe. But it didn't stop him from taking the next step, right? So we know that his doubt didn't supersede his faith, which is why he's such a great. Well, that's one part of why he's such a great example. The other part I was really trying to emphasize yesterday was the imperfection behind him and his wife, and so Abraham and Sarah get lifted up as these, and they were models of faith. But even they struggle with faith because logically, if you don't know the story, they're told they're going to have kids, and they're 90 and 80, right? They're 10 years apart, I think. And so by the time they actually do have the kids, I think he's 100 and she's 90, right?
Something like
and
that,
you don't have children when you're that age.
Yep.
And so
I hope not.
yeah, right. And so the faith that God was asking from them superseded even known biology of human nature.
Yeah,
right?
they were like, this doesn't
Like
happen.
it, like, and briefly mentioned it about like when Sarah hears that she's gonna have a baby, within a year, I think is what it said. She laughs out loud, like just like suck, like like okay. Okay, so, and it's funny because I think
That's what
Isaac
they
ends
name.
up meaning like the one who laughs or
Yeah,
brings joy,
yes,
which is beautiful. The symmetry there to all that. And this wasn't this. I did the history of Abraham, and I broke it down to multiple sermons like a year ago, I think it was. So this was not meant to be a deep dive into the facts. It was more of the what we can learn from his faithfulness.
Yeah.
So if you want to find the deep dive into the facts, you can go back on our website and find that. And I think I did 2 or 3 or maybe 4 parts with Abraham because there's a lot in there.
Not the website, but YouTube.
YouTube, yeah, YouTube. Not on the Dives YouTube either. On Grace Point Community Podcast or Grace Point Communities
That's all
YouTube.
it is. That's all it's at now. So.
Yeah.
And the faithfulness that they have, like, it would be much easier to have faithfulness and like God's like, oh, I'm going to deliver you from this sickness. You're like, oh yeah, God can do that. But then, what do you do when He tells you things like that just don't make any sense at all, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're praying for, you're laying in the hospital literally dying, and they're like, oh, 5% chance, and it's like we're gonna go pray for that guy, and it's like, but logically it doesn't make sense that he would
So-
What's the point of praying?
So I love stories, right? And I was a teenager, and there was an older lady in our denomination. I won't go into the full deal, but she was a widow and just struggled financially and all kinds of stuff. And God really met her needs on a daily basis. Like she was that financially struggling. And she told a story one time that she was in the morning, she was down praying with God, having some awesome conversation, just telling him, hey, my needs, what today, and it's been a few days since I've had eggs, and I just love to have some eggs, today for breakfast. And she said, all of a sudden, I just had this overwhelming urge to, hey, go open your front gate of your lawn. It's like, what? And like a couple different times she had to, and she finally, after the second or third time, she went outside, she opened the gate of the fence and everything, and then just kind of went back in and went to pray. It wasn't 4 or 5 minutes later that a family of ducks walk up into the gate. The mama duck lays down and actually lays eggs in her yard. I kid you not. I kid you not. You have to know the lady, but well, she's gone now. But someday I'll introduce you to her in heaven. But
yes, that'll be great.
she just duck walked up, laid like a couple eggs or something like that, and she had duck eggs that morning for breakfast. Like what? Yeah, it's supernatural stuff like that. But that was so formative for me as a teenager, right? Like as a young Christian, like oh, God does this for Lois Roysters. Like he can. What can He do for me that's crazy like that?
Yeah.
And like I forget a lot of times to make memory of those kind of things in my life.
100%.
Because He does it. He does the work.
Yeah.
Was it Elijah or Eliza? Which one went into the woods and brought food? The squirrel brought food, and one of the prophets.
It was Elisha, I think.
yes,
I think
yeah.
it was
One
the
of the
second.
prophets.
Yeah, Elisha.
I always
Why'd they have to be so closely named?
well we read the
Yes.
we read the kids
Yeah.
Bible to the like we read the. My kids are gonna be this off time. We're gonna be warped on Bible names because when we read the Bible names to the children's, I mispronounce every one.
I almost said
And-
Moria
and-
yesterday. Dude. Like it's okay.
My wife will look at me and be like, "You know it's not pronounced that way." Now I think I was pronouncing it like like one of the Frozen characters. Like I was.
Well,
Christoph? Yeah, I don't think he's in
no, probably not.
And she was like, now it becomes funny, and now I can't trick my brain. But
Yeah.
no, but off topic, it's off topic. But
Well, sorry. Well, there was a teenager that preached at a Blast event and said, instead of saying Elisha, said, how did they pronounce it? Elisha. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I
yes,
like that.
Yes.
Elisha.
And the whole message was on point. Everything about it was great, except they kept saying Elisha.
Yeah.
And that was the only criticism the
Ding that
judges
you
had
took.
afterward. The judges were like, hey, great points, great message. It's Elisha, though.
Just
but
at least he didn't say anything heretical.
But it's like, but that, I mean, but what was so good about that was, well, what your story is that it's easy for us to go, oh, it happened in the Bible.
Yeah.
It happened in Bible
you're so
times.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It happened in Bible times, but that was Bible times. God was a pillar of light,
Yeah.
and there was fire, and there was miracles.
He's different
and
now.
It's this. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen like that anymore.
Yeah.
It's not. It's you know
Yep.
what I mean. Like there's so many more noise now, and so when you hear stories that are like now, that's like a Red Sea parting.
That's
You
been
know what I mean?
yeah.
A duck
Yes.
laying eggs for
But-
you to have.
Yes, that's
You know, but
that's like-
that was 30 years ago, but still that's
But
that's
sure,
still modern
that's
enough,
life.
and
That's a
yeah,
lifetime.
yeah,
You know,
that's
in your life.
You don't forget that kind of stuff,
Right.
yeah. And sometimes
That would make
the
me
thought goes, well, you know, she was just ultra spiritual, right? And like she lived close to God, and that like I'll never be able to get there. But the reality is, like He cares about all of us that way. And if we're willing to commit to go that deeper level, to get that extra level of intimacy,
Yeah.
like we're only limited by us.
our own
Right.
obedience.
Yeah, yeah, our
level
own.
of sacrifice.
Yes, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
that
that's
comes
what we're
down
talking
to,
about.
You know, there's a son born, Isaac, and well, there's conflict and stuff. I don't know how we're doing on time, but there's,
We're doing okay.
It's whatever. But
We're horrible.
Abraham and Sarah try to kind of skirt God's plan, and Sarah ends up presenting Abraham with one of her servants. I'm pretty sure it was, and she's like, well, go sleep with this woman, take her as your wife, and that was customary then. It sounds weird today,
Yep.
but it wasn't completely out of the norm then. And there's a son that's born. If you've heard of Ishmael before, that's who he ends up being, and it creates a lot of internal conflict within the family there. Sarah has a lot of anger toward Hagar, and then Hagar tries to run, and God sends her back. And then eventually Isaac is born, and they separate their ways, and there's this whole descendancy of Ishmael that ends up being the Muslim split of the Abrahamic religion, right? And so there's a conflict that exists today still between two large religious groups that originates right in this, this story from 4,000 years ago. And Isaac is born, and they rejoice, and it's wonderful. What you
No,
got?
yeah. No, I just want to touch that.
Hit me.
Sometimes when we're waiting for God's plan, and it's not happening at our time pace. Sometimes we take things in our own hands, and we cause the conflict.
And we justify it through God's promise, but we're manipulating it, right? And we go, well, this is okay because God said He was going to give this to you. And did He really say He was going to do it this way? Maybe there's a different. Maybe we were wrong.
Maybe we were supposed
Yeah.
to do something.
Yes.
And so, that conflict would have never. That conflict itself would have never occurred if they didn't take it into their own hands.
Think of the pain and strife and struggle that's caused over the last 4,000 years.
Yes.
And if different decisions are made, then how much,
Different it would be.
how many lives aren't cut short? How much struggle doesn't happen? It's crazy. Think about that, right?
Yeah, it's almost as if God had a perfect design for the world, and we messed that up as humans. I don't know. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know.
So Isaac is born, and he grows up. Did you guys grow up believing that the whole sacrifice of Isaac, that picturing him as a small child, or was that just me?
No,
Teenager, right? He's like,
No, he was like in his late 20s, maybe early 30s.
I
That
thought
they
he was like
believe.
15 or 16.
Oh, the
I think that's what the.
there's a big range of
Yeah.
that's the
and
youngest
I'm
though he
just
would have
guessing.
been.
Right now, I'm just trying to grasp for memory.
Yeah, most
Like-
people would agree he was somewhere between like 25 and 30 probably, which is crazy.
Yeah.
'Cause I always imagine him being like 8.
Because because in my mind, it's like, let's just think about this now. We have a 90-year-old,
Yeah,
a 100-year-old man.
No, 125-year-old man.
Yeah, a 125-year-old man and a 35-year-old. I don't understand.
Oh.
Isaac at the point where he's like, Dad, I'm sorry, but you can't force me to go up this hill.
Obedience.
yeah,
Isaac had to have the same obedience.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he's a child, it's a lot easier to bring a child up.
So-
You can force an 8-year-old. I can force
Yeah.
an 8-year-old. But I would never be able to force a 35.
No.
I always point back in this kind of stuff. You got to think of the culture at the time. It was very respect driven,
Yeah.
right? So it would have been against everything that Isaac had ever known to disagree with his father.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah,
that
and he-
it's
he-
that ingrained. No, well, I mean,
the opposite.
we make jokes about that, but I mean, it's really that. There's all kinds of that authority structure challenge today. Back then, it wasn't so much that culturally, or at least I don't. From what I read, I don't think that it was.
I would say him asking the questions is about as rebellious as he probably ever was to his father, right? Whereas Abraham keeps. So what would have happened is they would have gone with like a group of people
Yeah.
to a certain point, and like Abraham's talking back to that group that went with them, and he's saying, "Hey, we'll return. We will be back,"
Yeah.
because he believes so much so that God's going to deliver, and so Abraham and Isaac break off from the party there. And Isaac is the reason they think he's older is because like some of the requirements of to carry some of the things that it would have taken to have the sacrifice, an 8-year-old wouldn't have been able to do, right? And so that he's old enough to fight off and defend himself, and so he's carrying all this stuff up the mountain, and he asks the question like, "Hey, where's the where's the sacrifice?" And I gotta believe that like that is pretty rebellious to
It's
even
bold,
question
yeah.
that, right? So he must some red flags must have been going off in his
Yeah.
mind as he's looking around and like. And Abraham continually says, "Oh well, God's going to provide that. Don't worry, son. God's going to provide that." And
The other time, Isaac didn't know that he was the sacrifice.
no, until he's
he
up on the he's raised
So that-
up.
Yeah, so I
and,
can see it being 35 because you're just saying, "Hey, we're going on this trip."
yeah,
Just the,
yeah.
yeah.
You want to go on a hike, son?
You wanna
Just
go on a hike, son?
just the layers of trust in this story are
Yes.
just amazing. Isaac trusting Abraham so much
Isaac
that Abraham's voice from God was real. Like
Yeah.
he trusts Abraham enough
Yes.
that he is going to provide.
Well,
Abraham
didn't
trusting
even
God.
have a thought in his mind that he was going to be the sacrifice.
I think he did because he was questioning the. Hey, where's
Probably
the?
towards
I think
the
he
end.
was
Maybe.
old enough to put two and
don't-
two together and
Towards
go, "Hey,
towards the end, you would say towards the end.
Oh,
or
I
towards
think
the end or at the
he looks
beginning?
around and says, "We have everything we need except one thing that's very important for this process."
Yeah.
And
Get on the
normally,
altar, son.
he's been a part of this process before. So normally he's used
Oh,
to.
yeah, so he knows.
We have this animal here. We have this sacrifice that we need to do, and this time we don't.
Yeah.
And it's starting to get a little sketchy right now, Dad. And he goes through with it anyways because Abraham would have had to have told Isaac by this point of hey, this is what God promised me, and like. You're a part of that, and not just are you part of it now, but you're going to be part of it forever. Like the descendants that countless, you can't count them to the stars. That's going to happen through you too. And so there had to be this, this unity of that there.
Sure.
And then God delivers this sacrifice, which is just a direct. The whole thing is you can directly correlate it to God sacrificing Christ for us, right? And it's just beautiful the substitution that's made there at the last moment, and how that substitution covers and saves Isaac in that time, and the substitution of Christ saves us for all time, right? And it's just how this people say, well, it's the Old Testament, it's back there, it's just it's whatever, and like no, like there's there's a direct correlation to what's happening now to this right here, and it's all step-by-step process to bringing about the redemption of mankind. And I don't know, I can't read it without seeing those parallels, but
Oh, yeah.
maybe you guys can, I don't know, but
I mean, the whole point of Scripture is in the Old Testament was the point to Jesus.
yeah, that's every
You know, what I
bit
mean?
of
right after.
yes,
It literally in Genesis, God promises Jesus in Genesis, 1, 2, or 3, where He says you're gonna step on the snake's head, or
After the fall, yep.
yeah, and so and then the rest of it was all pointing to that.
It makes
I
sense
don't know
to me.
how. Yeah, I mean, but even the Jewish people literally will say that they just don't think Jesus was the person that they're pointing to.
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're just wrong.
They're just. I mean, I don't know how you read Isaiah 53. I think, and
Yeah, I don't understand it, but I mean, I'm sure they have their justification to it, but
yeah,
the level of faith and obedience in that story are just
Yep.
remarkable.
I don't. Yeah. I question I don't know if I'm there. I don't know if I have Abraham. I don't know if I where Abraham's faith is. We're talking about getting to the levels because of where it started and where it goes and where it goes and where it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm probably here, and Abraham's faith is try.
Maybe when you're 125,
They have 125
Yeah.
years to do this.
Yeah. I don't.
Not me.
probably not.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and say we're
Well,
not.
I
Yeah.
mean, And then we were talking about we try to compare ourselves to.
Yeah, comparison's bad, all that stuff.
Well, God's
and
not
just-
calling you to be Abraham,
Thank
right?
God.
He
Thank
he
you.
might call you to model some of the faithfulness that he has, but
I
he's
think he cut. Yeah, well, that's 100%.
Yeah.
I think everybody he calls to model some of the
Yeah.
faithfulness
Yep.
that Abraham has.
but he calls each of us to continue that redemption plan,
Right.
in a different but also similar way. What I mean by that is like the goal is always similar, but how you like the way he's given you skills and talents will see that be done a little bit differently, right?
Well, because I think we all want to say that we have that kind of faith.
I think we all can have. We have
I
access
agree.
to that.
Yeah,
by
we
the
have
way.
we have
Yeah,
access.
no, 100%.
I think there has to be a spirit, like a striving spirit in us to want to
achieve
grow
that.
for that. Yeah,
Sure.
because one of the common like things to say is if you're not growing, you're falling back, right? Like you're decaying. Like there's no middle ground there. There's no
Yeah.
plateauing. And I know it's a little bit cliche, but it's also really true.
It is.
I mean, because like we're not to Abraham's faith yet. Abraham wasn't to Abraham's faith yet. I don't think.
Yeah,
Like
no,
he
you're-
until
It
that,
only took him
like
to do that.
yeah, he was never to that point until he was to that point, right? Like I mean, we're not
He got
there.
prepared
There
on
were
that
different
point.
levels
Yes,
and
he got
different walks
prepared
along
for
the
that.
journey, and like he was built up to that, and then we get to read. No, you've already mentioned it. There's some times that Abraham and Sarah really messed up. I mean, really messed up. God still used them. And I mean, we don't talk about those as much, but yeah, I think
Can't leave
it's
out
there.
about her being his wife.
Right? Yeah, there's some
It's my
like
sister.
some really confusing things in Abraham and Sarah's story, and throughout
Ten Commandments
Old
didn't
Testament
exist yet.
scripture.
I
You
love the-
just don't
I-
understand it.
There's a
Yeah.
king, right? Wasn't that a king they did? Yeah, I love his reaction of like, "Why did you do this to me?"
Mm-hmm.
Like, what?
Twice. They did it twice. So
He's like, what are you talking about?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Abraham trying to take stuff into his own hand,
Yeah.
his hand a lot, but I mean that's should be encouraging to you.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what
you
I was.
can make
yes.
mistakes. You
Absolutely.
can mess up, and God can still use you.
Yes.
As long as you continue to be obedient and grow
Yeah.
with Him, and realize what your mistakes are. Ask for forgiveness.
Yep.
And continue to walk with Him, and God will do that big thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
That big thing in your life that He's called you to completely be. Yeah.
Yes.
It might not be to run to be a father of a nation. But you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
probably not going to be that.
Probably not. Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
probably never going to ask you to sacrifice your kids. Okay, it's probably never. So like,
Now I'll push back on you on that one.
literally like that, sacrifice your kids.
No,
like-
not
I'm
like with a
I'm
knife.
That's
but
what
I
I'm
think,
talking
but
about.
I think he'll.
No,
I
no,
think
no, no,
there's
no,
a
no.
time where he asked you to, hey,
Yeah, give trust over-
Yeah,
yeah.
you trust me
Yeah.
enough to
No,
give
that
it back
yes,
to me.
that's
yeah.
not. No, I'm literally talking
Yeah.
about
You mean literally knife
killing.
in the air.
He's probably not going to ask anybody to
Yeah.
do that. So like, if Abraham, a human being, can get to that point, you're a human.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing super special about Abraham except for he was obedient to God.
Yeah, yeah.
He became friends with God, and you could have that same ability.
Yeah.
So one of the things we are running close on
That's
time
okay.
though. But one of the things that we've talked about several different times is that big things are relative to where you are in life, right? When you're
That's
you're a teenager or you're a child
Yeah.
and like you lose your favorite toy or your girlfriend breaks up with you or whatever, that's a huge deal in your life at that time. 20 years later, you're not even going to remember that, right? So I think to speak to your point about asking to do big things, God asks you to do, I think it's relative. Like if I look back in my life and I think about times where God has told me to stop watching this television show or whatever, that was a big thing in my life at that time. Like that's almost like sacrificing my kid, right? At that time.
Oh, sure.
But now, like every step of the journey he's requiring more and more out of me because he knows, hey,
listen to
you
the
can
small
handle it.
things.
Yeah. So,
I think there's a verse on that.
oh yeah. Be faithful in the small things. And you be ruler over many and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But, I don't know.
So yeah, it comes down to the obedience part. The worst. I mean, obviously, you don't want to sin. You don't
No.
want to fall into mistakes. Nobody
Yep.
wants to make a mistake. But after that's happened, the worst thing you could do is
Live
allow
in it.
that sin or mistake to multiply
Yep.
and allow the enemy to hold that over your head so much that you don't grow from it. God's not done with you just because you've sinned or just because you've messed up. He didn't quit with Abraham because he fell short. There's a ton of other stories. Just open the Bible. You'll find flawed people that God used and worked through. And I mean, we can just start listing them, and they're all like, "Oh, this is what the thing they did."
But it doesn't make
the thing they did. Like,
just to fix this point. Sin is not okay. So it's
No,
not like,
no.
oh, if I sin, I know God's going to forgive me.
No.
I know it's going to get better, and I can do. But sin will cause you will reap what you sow,
yes,
and sin will cause conflict in your life.
yes,
Consequences too.
There
Yeah.
are consequences.
Absolutely.
To sin. So
Yes.
don't think, oh, I can. God's go.
No.
No, because I mean, if you want problems, sure. I
yeah.
guess.
Even if and God will forgive you, but that doesn't mean that you don't. There could be earthly consequences that you're not excused from.
Yeah.
They're like God forgives murderers, I believe, if they are genuine about it. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden you don't stand trial for your crimes, right?
Yeah.
And that's a big example, but
and
obviously
you will.
God forgives people for adultery. God forgives people for losing their temper. But it doesn't mean that there isn't consequences that come with that stuff too. So
Yeah.
there's don't go and sin. But if you've caught yourself there and you realize you're there, don't let that sin be the thing that holds you there.
100%.
Like God can deliver you from that, and you can in order to live a life out of sin. Like not so that you can just go back and sin again.
Yeah.
And now we're preaching.
Jesus-
now we're preaching Paul.
Yeah, that's a different podcast,
Jesus
but that's
didn't die
okay.
for you for
Yeah.
go live
So
in
you
sin.
can just go right back to it and go right back to it.
You
like,
can have victory over
It
it.
cheapens grace, right?
Yes,
That's what
yes.
Paul
I mean,
said.
we're-
It
yeah, we're
cheapens
preaching
grace.
Paul now.
Yeah, yeah.
All
that's
right.
for another podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Catch us at 10:30 on Sunday mornings, online or in person, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.